My first boyfriend and the little red record player. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. Well, I've been telling stories from my life, and I've told these stories before here on my channel, but it's been a while, and I have a lot of new friends here on my channel, and so I thought these stories are so well worth telling again. So if you've heard these stories before, you may want to sit through them again, and if not, well, I hope you enjoyed them the first time. Well, this one goes back to when I was 5 years old, and we lived in a very small southern-like town, and it didn't have many shops in it. It had, I think, a little restaurant. It had a factory nearby. It had, a couple local bars, honky-tonk bars, and it had a hardware store. And the hardware store seemed to sell a little bit of everything. Well, my first boyfriend was Kirby, and he was 6 and I was 5. I was 5 and he was 6, and he liked to play with Barbie dolls. Well, he was the rich little boy in the community, and we were the poor family. We had the $75 broke down car that only drove in reverse, and he had always had a brand new Chevy Impala. His family always had a brand new Chevy Impala. Well, if you fast forward that, if you've heard any of my other stories, he became my boyfriend in high school later. And he used to pick me up in his new Chevy Impala. But at this time, I was 5 and he was 6, and we would walk to kindergarten together. We were in the same kindergarten class. And, we had a lot of fun. He let me play with his Barbies because we were too poor to buy Barbie dolls. They were $3 a doll, whereas I always got a Midge doll, which was Barbie's cousin, I think, and it was $2. So I always had Midge dolls, and he got the Barbie dolls. And he had the Barbie Dream House, and he had the Barbie Mobile, and he had all that. And so we would play together every day, and we just had so much fun together. So when we would walk together to kindergarten, the bullies would follow us. And the bullies were probably a year or two older than we were, and they would pick on him. And they wouldn't really bother me, but they would pick on him. And they would knock his glasses off and all kinds of things like that, and just kind of torment us every day on the way to school. So one day, the bullies came and they knocked his glasses off again. And fortunately, they didn't break. And so I decided I'd had enough. And so I began to charge like a bull, kind of took my foot and kind of, moved it back and forth like a bull does. And I kind of, bent down a little bit, and I let out a big scream, and I ran towards them. Well, let me tell you, those 3 bullies ran as fast as they could down the street. And I have to tell you, they never bothered Kirby or me again, ever. And so all it took was for me to stand up to those bullies, and they never bothered us again. I think they moved on to somebody else. Anyhow, so we walked that same little path every day to school, and it was, not a very big school. It wasn't a one-room schoolhouse, but it wasn't a big school at all. And so we'd have to cross the railroad tracks. Well, by the railroad tracks was a little hardware store. And in the window of the hardware store, there was a little red record player. And it was the cutest little thing. And so all of us in a group, even the bullies, the used to be bullies, would stand there, and everyone would say, "Oh, that's going to be mine. My parents are going to buy that for me." And I think all of us just had wishful thinking. The only ones probably whose parents could afford it was Kirby. Kirby's parents could afford the record player. And so what happened was, one day, after many, many days of walking past the record player and the hardware store, the record player was no longer there. And I was so upset, and everyone was you could tell that they were upset too, but not as much as I was, because I really wanted that little red record player. And I figured Kirby probably got it, but I wasn't sure. And so, we were all kind of like just standing there, like, what happened to this little red record player? And then I began to cry. And I just didn't want anyone to see me cry, so I took off and I ran towards home. and we had a screen door, and I opened up the screen door and I was crying and crying, and my mom said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And remember, we were the poor family, so we couldn't afford much. And I said, "Somebody bought the record player, the little red record player." She said, "Look over there on the table." And I looked on the kitchen table, and there was the little red record player. My mom and my dad had scraped enough money together to buy me that little red record player. And they could only afford one record. It was about a little duck that went quack, quack. But they bought me that record player. I was so excited. I played that little record over and over and over and over, at least until I got more records. And Kirby was really, really surprised. I couldn't wait to tell him. And he was very surprised. He was disappointed, but yet he was happy for me. And so he came over and he played with the little red record player too. And so that was my first boyfriend, was Kirby. And, I was 5 and he was 6. And that was the story of the little red record player. Well, fast forwarded quite a few years, and I think I was probably 14 and he was 15, because he got his driver's license before I did, and we could get the driver's license back then at 15 years old. And so he got the driver's license, and he would take his parents' brand new Chevy Impala, because they bought a new one every year. And he'd come pick, well, we lived next door to each other, so, but by then we had moved away from there, a little bit of a distance. So he would come pick me up, and away we would go in the red, well, I don't know if it was a red Chevy Impala, because my first car was a red Chevy Impala, but it was an old one, a 65. And so anyhow, he'd pick me up, and away we'd go in this big and brand new shiny Impala. And, he would just drive us everywhere. And by then he had gotten so very, very handsome. He didn't wear glasses anymore. And he was just very handsome. And so we had kind of a secret relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, for, maybe a year or so, because his parents were Catholic and mine were Protestant. And at that time, it just, wasn't really acceptable so much for, being a Methodist. I think we were a Methodist at the time, Methodist and a Catholic to go together. But so we kept it a secret. So that's just another story from my life. Well, I hope you enjoyed. So from my house to yours, may God bless you. I hope you like, share, subscribe, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.